I'd like to introduce to you all Scot Refsland, who is the chairman of the Drone Sports Association. The producer, that entity produces the Drone Nationals, which I attended in New York, the Drone Worlds, which just happened in Hawaii. And excuse me?
It's happening in October.
Oh, it's happening in October. It hasn't happened yet. So people can scoot their way over to gorgeous Hawaii and watch this event.
Yeah, where else would be the most perfect epic location to go have a nice race?
That's phenomenal, Scot. I'm so glad that you're here with us. Where in Hawaii are the Worlds taking place?
They're on the island of Oahu, and we actually found that the Jurassic Park backlot Hawaii movie set was actually in just north of Oahu, or Honolulu, about 40 minutes. And it has these beautiful 1,200-foot cliffs on either side. I think everybody can recognize that from any version of Jurassic Park or Jurassic World that you've seen. And so when we saw that we were like, yep, that's the place we need to have it in.
Oh, that's going to be spectacular. Governor's Island was gorgeous enough. That was quite a venue for your nationals as well. So I'm so glad that you've been able to join us here today. I got so interested in drone sports when I attended the Nationals, which was just a wonderfully professionally put on event. I was really impressed with all the work you guys did and how this is a real sport. And it's a real sport in its infancy, but I could definitely see that even in its infancy, it's got a lot of appeal, not just for people who want to spectate, but people who want to participate. Does the Drone Sports Association deal with anything other than drone racing? You stay away from the combat drones and things, or do you?
You know, that's an interesting question, and we did a rebrand about 3, 4, 5 months ago because we really were looking at is it drone racing or drone sports more what we want to do? Because I don't know if you've ever seen the ones that I did, the FPV Paradise Tour, which I took everybody through Hawaii when we were doing our scouting trips for the Worlds, and we did things like we created what's called now cliff surfing or cliff diving, where you dive down, sheer cliffs and that kind of stuff. And so that was first part of our look at drone sports and not necessarily just racing. And so like if you look at freestyle is not necessarily racing, it's more of a sport. And so we updated our name to Drone Sports Association instead of Rotor Sports or any other name, because we really were looking at the gambit of what's coming up in the next, 10 years. What's the next decade going to bring as far as drone sports?
Right. And just so people understand the legitimacy of racing in particular and the other sports that are developing sort of in tandem with it as drone technology continues to evolve. ESPN and the Discovery Channel have both covered drone racing events. They've covered the Nationals live. I assume they're going to cover the Worlds live. Is that true?
Yes. Or we're going to be doing a 1-hour content on there. We're still deciding on whether we want to do the live stream just yet.
Mm-hmm. And the thing that really struck me in attending this and seeing it firsthand was something that my friend Keith Stryer mentioned while we were there, and that is that this parallel between drone racing and really, really high-speed auto racing, whether it's the IRL or Formula One or what have you, that there's a lot of incubation of technology that happens in that sort of extreme racing setting that envelopes that get pushed, et cetera, that then wind up seeing applications in other areas. And the whole tie-in with virtual reality and augmented reality and drone racing seems a very ripe area for that to happen, not to mention just the technology that goes into the vehicles themselves. For someone who hasn't for someone who's never even heard of drone racing before, and I assume we have some watching and listening to us right now, can you explain how VR and possibly AR tie in with the sport, the different ways
Sure.
that happens?
So my favorite little soundbite that I say is that I have a PhD in virtual reality, and I got it in 2001. I've been in VR since 1987. So if you put the numbers together, I've been around a really long time. And what I like to say is that it took me about 30 years in one drone race to experience true virtual reality. And my definition of virtual reality is that when you put on your goggles, you're not here anymore, you're there. You're in the altered reality or the perceived reality of where you are. And when I tried FPV flying for the very first time, I got vertigo. My hands were sweating. Because I was in the air, I was 100 feet up in the air. I was going 30 miles an hour, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to fall out of the air. And I literally felt like I was going to fall out of the air. And so it really took a lot of might for me to suppress all of those fear of heights to, whatever people experience. And once I started understanding what the greater impact of what this meant was, everybody in there, I don't know if I've ever met any one human that's never had the dream of flight or the out-of-body experience that we all talk about as humans. And what it is that it's so inherently attractive to the younger generations, because it's giving our younger generations a chance to be a superhero. They can leap, trees in a single bound by flying. And so it's literally giving the next generation this freedom that they're getting of being able to be not just earthbound, but now they can be a bird and they can fly it. And it's giving them superpowers. And so in this kind of new area of sports in general, we have this kind of tabling off effect of what's going on in traditional stick and ball sports, even in the NASCAR or in the racing industries. There's an inward bound look at how the technology is going, because it's getting now to, well, if your airframe is 2 millimeters off, then then you're disqualified, because there's no innovation that's going on to it anymore. And what drone racing does is suddenly, because it's this brand new sport, it's brand new innovation, and it's being built by a bunch of IT people and computer tech nerds who love iteration. They love getting something new, and all of them have at least 3D printers in their garage running all the parts and stuff like that. So it's outpacing the innovation of what even the industry can handle at the moment. And it literally is a garage type of experience. So what's really interesting is we're getting this three-pronged perfect storm happening. We've got this love of racing, is you get two of anything together, 2 cars, 2 drones, and you've got a race. You've got the esports kind of thing happening. And then you've got this virtual reality and augmented reality kind of thing, and all of these are triple-digit growth areas. And so for me, what the easiest way I can explain to you why I think the virtual reality and augmented reality is going to be the vehicle to really propel that is going to be compelling content like drone racing. Because drone racing has one big Achilles heel, and it literally is that when you watch drone racing as a spectator, it's like watching gnats in a football field flying around and who's first. You can't see it. And so it doesn't come alive until you sit in the cockpit with the first-person view goggles, and you sit in the drone and race in over all the obstacles and the courses on the course. And then you're flying as if you are the pilot, or if you are the pilot in this case and piloting it, then you're flying as if you're in the cockpit. So there is no difference. You can't tell whether you're piloting, a little tiny drone or a big drone. They all perform pretty much the same. So this is where drone racing is ripe for augmented reality and virtual reality. Yeah, so you got some clips in there. So all of these would be first-person view of how you would experience a race. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with things like sports vision that Larry Ellison innovated with the America's Cup, because it's sort of the same thing where you got a bunch of yachts out in the middle of nowhere. Well, how do you tell which is which and who's who? And so they innovated this GPS system that goes over top of it, tracks all the boats in where they are in location, and then puts data overlays over top of them. So wherever they float, they're actually this data overlay going, hey, this is the American boat, this is the Oracle boat, this is the Australian boat. And so suddenly it gives you these rich data overlays over top of all this stuff. So this is where we've been heading on this, is that from a spectator experience, now we get all these rich data overlays to show who's in first and how they can do this. Now, what's really interesting is that the younger generations, they're change agents. And like the Pokemon Go thing, the Hunger Games, if you look at the trend of what's going, nobody wants to sit and watch a passive game anymore. And this is why, stick and ball sports, because they're very traditionally, you have a beer and you sit on your sofa and you watch. Well, esports is pushing it into being participatory sports. And so what drone racing is, because there is no rules and regulations of drone racing just yet, if we wanted to overlay data that has collision detection to physical and virtual, we can. So for an example, like I could put an asteroid field in the middle of a physical race course that's a digital overlay on it. And then if I say, hey, pilots, all the spectators, you want to vote for an asteroid field in the middle of this course? And everybody goes, yeah, let's do it. Suddenly this asteroid appears in there and pilots have to navigate around it. And if a physical pilot crashes into that virtual obstacle, I can throw that physical airframe out of the air. So what it's doing is it's pushing us into this boundaries of the next generation of Pokemon Go, but on a much higher, more sophisticated layer.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And I want to drill down on something you mentioned just a moment ago. Since we're a show that looks at the intersection of technology and law, we've been talking a lot about the new commercial drone rules that the FAA has just announced at the end of August, and comparing and contrasting them to the hobby rules that existed a little before. And what you just said is you don't think drone racing fits into either of those, and that the FAA hasn't addressed it directly yet. Is that pretty much the position of drone racing at this point?
All I can say is it's drama, drama, drama.
Indeed.
Somebody's making a bunch of money on litigation right now, for sure. I bet it's Jim Williams at Denton's. That's who it is now.
Well, at the same time, though, judging by the Part 107 rules that were released, FPV flying was pretty strictly written out. They were not, it wasn't an omission. They said like FPV flying, you need a license, you need a pilot's license unless you are, complying with these other rules they didn't say. So, how surely you guys are thinking about that on, on some level.
Yeah. So let me give you a little bit of background on what's going on. So my second day job is to work with the FAA, and my third day job is to work with the FCC, because both of those pieces for drone racing and drone sports is out of compliance. And if you don't have a ham radio license, you're out of compliance. You're breaking into federal law. But ham radio is a legacy format. In fact, I bumped into a bunch of ham radio operators at a race one time, and I said, "Oh, you've got right away because you have the permit to fly here." And they're like, "Well, what frequencies you fly it on?" And I'm like, "Well, 5,600 to 5,900. Like, we haven't been there for years because everybody at Best Buy has bought non-compliant stuff. And so we've skipped off. We've never been in that one. I'm like, well, okay, that's why FCC is not enforcing those laws. For the FAA is a different kettle of fish, because what they're trying to do is define, they're doing their job really well because they are our safety bulldog, and that's what they're trying to do ultimately. They're not trying to be the good guy or the bad guy. They're trying to enforce safety in the airspace, in the national airspace. And so I get that. And where the conflict is happening is that what is that definition of it? And so there was, as you guys all know, all the different pieces that have been written over the last couple of years, since 2012 and 2014, they've been trying to keep up in fire mode with all the proliferation of stuff. And drone racing is no exception. Unfortunately, drone racing has been the little black sheep of the whole thing, because we've had Brendan Schulman in battling for DJI's rights, for commercial ventures, for the 3D robotics guys. Anybody's had a budget to put a lobbyist in Capitol Hill. All the rules are written for those people specifically, so that like when I look at 107, and I've been talking with FAA about 107 a lot, I said, 107 Part 37B says it's a yield the right of way, and I said, drone racing is about crashing. It's like we have to. It is a crash.
It's like
That's
NASCAR.
the thrilling part.
Right.
And so then they went, oh well, yeah, this was written before we knew that we were going to be, putting drone racing underneath this umbrella of 107. And so I go, well, the one of Part 37B is going to be a full stop. And they go, yeah, let's think about that one for a second. And then they said, well, if it's your intention to avoid collision at all costs, then you can do it. And I said, well, of course it is, because if you crash and you don't win, you don't get the prize money. So of course we're going to be trying to avoid crashes. And then they go, okay, we'll give your blessing on that one.